At Christmas dinner, my grandpa smiled at my mom and said, "I hope he loves the car you bought him with the money I gave." I froze and asked, "What money?" The room went silent. Then I learned the car wasn't the only thing she kept from me. I, 24M, sat at the Christmas table surrounded by family, feeling like I was exactly where I belonged. The smell of roasted turkey filled the dining room, and everyone seemed genuinely happy for the first time in months. My girlfriend sat beside me, squeezing my hand under the table whenever my younger brother made one of his terrible jokes. Mom had outdone herself with the decorations, the food, everything. It felt perfect. Then Grandpa raised his glass and looked directly at Mom with that warm smile of his. He told her he hoped I loved the car she bought me with the money he gave her. The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my fork freeze halfway to my mouth. I turned to Mom and asked what money he was talking about. The room went completely silent. Even my brother stopped chewing. Mom's face drained of color. She laughed nervously and told Grandpa he must be confused, that he was getting old and mixing things up. But Grandpa wasn't having it. His smile faded, and he said he was many things but not senile. He said he gave her $20,000 last spring specifically to help me buy a reliable car for my new job. $20,000. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I looked at the beat-up Honda Civic sitting in the driveway that I'd scraped together $5,000 for by working double shifts at the warehouse. I asked Mom again, slowly, what Grandpa was talking about. She tried to change the subject, suggesting we talk about it later, but Grandpa cut her off. He said there was nothing to discuss later because he gave her the money in March and she promised she'd help me get something dependable. Dad set down his wine glass hard enough that it rattled. He asked Mom if this was true. She started stammering something about expenses and timing, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing back through the past year. March was when I'd started my job at the engineering firm downtown, the one I'd worked so hard to land. I'd been complaining for weeks before that about needing a car, about how expensive everything was, about how I'd have to take the bus for months until I saved enough. Mom had listened to all of it with sympathy, or what I thought was sympathy. She'd told me she wished she could help, but money was tight. Meanwhile, she'd been sitting on $20,000 that Grandpa gave her specifically for me. I felt sick. My girlfriend asked if this was really happening. Grandpa nodded and said he'd even written the check out to Mom because I didn't have a bank account that could handle that kind of deposit at the time, which was true. He'd trusted her to do the right thing. He looked more sad than angry, like he was disappointed in his own daughter. I pushed back from the table and asked Mom where the money went. She tried to reach for my arm, but I pulled away. She said things had been complicated, that there were bills, that she'd planned to give it to me, but circumstances changed. I asked what circumstances could possibly justify stealing $20,000 from her own son. She flinched at the word stealing. Dad demanded to know where the money went. Mom's eyes darted around the table like she was looking for an escape route. Finally, she admitted she'd used some of it to pay off credit card debt. Some of it. I asked how much was some. She went quiet. Dad asked again, his voice getting louder. She whispered that it was most of it. Most of $20,000 gone to credit cards I didn't even know she had. My brother, who'd been silent this whole time, suddenly asked if that was why Mom bought herself a new Mercedes last summer. The table went silent again. I remembered that car, how Mom had explained it was a lease deal too good to pass up, how she'd worked so hard and deserved something nice. I'd believed her. I'd even been happy for her. Now I was calculating in my head. A Mercedes lease, even a good deal, wouldn't be cheap. Credit card debt that required most of $20,000 to pay off. I asked Mom how much debt she'd really been in. She said it didn't matter now because it was paid off and she'd been planning to pay me back once things settled. I asked when exactly things would settle. She had no answer. Grandpa said he never would have given her the money if he'd known. He said he would have written the check directly to me or helped me open a proper account. He looked genuinely heartbroken. I told him it wasn't his fault, that he'd tried to help and Mom had taken advantage of that. Mom started crying, saying I was being cruel, that she'd been drowning in debt and didn't know what else to do. Dad asked why she didn't come to him. Mom said she was ashamed, that the debt was from before they'd gotten married and she'd been trying to handle it herself. But $20,000 of my money wasn't handling it herself. That was handling it at my expense. I stood up and told everyone I needed air. My girlfriend followed me outside onto the porch. The cold December wind bit at my face, but I barely felt it. She asked if I was okay. which was a stupid question, but I appreciated her asking anyway. I told her I wasn't okay, that I'd spent the last 9 months riding the bus in the rain, eating ramen to save money, working overtime whenever I could, all while my mother sat on 20 grand that was meant for me. She hugged me and said we'd figure it out. But what was there to figure out? The money was gone. Mom had spent it on her debt and her luxury car while I struggled. I felt betrayed in a way I didn't know was possible. This wasn't some stranger or distant relative. This was my mother. We went back inside after a few minutes. The table was chaos. Dad was yelling at Mom about trust and responsibility. My brother was on his phone, probably texting his friends about the disaster unfolding. Grandpa just looked sad, staring at his untouched plate. Mom was crying harder now, mascara running down her face, trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen. I interrupted all of them and said I wanted to know the complete truth. I asked Mom what else she'd kept from me. She insisted there was nothing else, but something in her expression made me not believe her. I asked again. She wiped her eyes and said there really wasn't anything else. Grandpa cleared his throat. He said there actually was something else. My blood ran cold. Grandpa explained that he'd also set up a college fund for me when I was born, about $15,000 that was supposed to be given to me when I turned 18. He'd told Mom about it years ago and assumed she'd handled it properly. I'd never seen a penny of it. I'd taken out student loans for college, loans I was still paying off, while there'd been $15,000 sitting somewhere with my name on it. I looked at Mom and asked if this was true. She nodded slowly. I asked where that money went. She said some of it went to my college expenses that I didn't know about, like textbooks and fees, but the rest had gone to keeping the household running when Dad was between jobs 5 years ago. I turned to Dad and asked if he knew about this. He looked as shocked as I was. He said he'd never known about any college fund. So Mom had kept secrets from both of us. She'd intercepted money meant for me from Grandpa twice now and spent it without telling anyone. I asked if there was anything else, any other funds or gifts or money that was supposed to be mine that she'd taken. She swore there wasn't. I didn't believe her, but I also didn't have the energy to keep digging. I told Mom I was leaving and that I didn't want to speak to her until she figured out how to make this right. She begged me not to go, said we were family and families worked through problems together. I said families didn't steal from each other. Dad said he'd handle it, that he'd talk to her and figure something out, but I was past talking. My girlfriend and I left. We spent Christmas night at her apartment, barely speaking, just processing everything. The next morning I woke up angrier than I'd been the night before. I'd had time to think about everything Mom had taken from me. The car money would have changed my entire year. The college fund would have meant fewer loans, less debt, less stress during school. She'd stolen opportunities from me, not just money. I called Grandpa and thanked him for speaking up. He apologized for causing a scene at Christmas dinner, but said he couldn't stay quiet anymore. He'd suspected something was wrong when he saw my old Honda months ago, but Mom had assured him I'd wanted to buy something modest to save money. He'd believed her until he couldn't anymore. I told him I was glad he said something, that I needed to know the truth. Then I asked Grandpa if he'd be willing to write a statement about the money he gave Mom and when he gave it. He asked why, and I explained that I was considering legal options. He went quiet for a moment, then said he'd do whatever I needed. He said Mom was his daughter and he loved her, but what she'd done was wrong and I deserved justice. I spent the week after Christmas researching. I talked to a lawyer friend from college who explained that while family theft cases were complicated, I potentially had a case for conversion of funds, especially with Grandpa as a witness. The college fund was trickier since I'd been a minor when that money was supposed to be distributed, but the car money was clear-cut. $20,000 given with specific intent, documented by Grandpa's bank records, never used for its intended purpose. Mom called me repeatedly. I ignored every call. Dad texted saying we needed to talk, that Mom was devastated, that family was more important than money. I texted back asking if he'd feel the same way if someone had stolen $35,000 from him. He stopped texting after that. New Year's came and went. My girlfriend threw a small party, but I wasn't in the mood to celebrate. I kept thinking about all the times I'd struggled while Mom watched. All the times I'd called her stressed about money, and she'd offered empty sympathy. All the times she'd encouraged me to work harder, save more, be responsible, while she was sitting on my money living comfortably. In early January, I filed a demand letter through my lawyer friend. It laid out the facts clearly. $20,000 given by Grandpa for a car, $0 used for a car, demand for immediate repayment with interest. We sent copies to Mom, Dad, and Grandpa. Mom called me crying within an hour of receiving it. I answered this time. She asked how I could do this to her, how I could threaten legal action against my own mother. I told her she'd stolen from her own son first, so she didn't get to play the family card now. She said she didn't have $20,000 to give me, that her finances were still tight. I suggested she sell the Mercedes. She went silent. I told her she had 30 days to come up with a payment plan or I'd file a lawsuit. She begged me not to, said it would destroy the family, that people would find out and judge her. I said maybe she should have thought about that before stealing from me. She started crying harder and I hung up. Dad called next. He said I was being unreasonable, that Mom had made a mistake but didn't deserve to be dragged through court. I asked if he'd known about the Mercedes being purchased with money that was meant for me. He admitted he hadn't known the connection, but said Mom had been struggling with debt and made a bad choice. I told him a bad choice was spending $50 of my money, not $35,000 across multiple occasions. He sighed and said he'd see what they could do. 2 weeks passed. My lawyer friend reached out and said Mom's attorney had contacted him. Apparently Mom had lawyered up too, which told me she was taking this seriously. Her attorney offered $5,000 as a settlement, a fraction of what she owed. I told my friend to reject it. Mom had stolen $35,000 from me when including the college fund. I wanted every penny back. My brother called me for the first time since Christmas. He said I was tearing the family apart, that Mom was having panic attacks, that Dad was stressed beyond belief. I asked where he'd been when Mom was spending my money. He said he hadn't known about any of it. I told him that was the point, that Mom had been lying to everyone, and now she had to face consequences. He called me vindictive and hung up. Maybe I was vindictive. Maybe I should have been more forgiving. But every time I thought about backing down, I remembered sitting on that bus in the rain going to work, remembered eating cheap food to save money, remembered the stress of those student loans. Mom had watched all of that and done nothing while sitting on money that could have helped me. That wasn't a simple mistake. That was calculated selfishness. In February, Mom's attorney made another offer. $10,000 paid over 2 years. Still insulting, but progress. I countered with $25,000 for the car money plus interest, paid over 1 year, and we'd call the college fund a loss since proving that case would be harder. Mom's attorney said they'd consider it. A week later, Grandpa called. He said Mom had come to him asking for money to settle with me. He'd refused. He said he loved her, but she needed to fix her own mess, and borrowing more money would just create new problems. He asked if I was sure I wanted to keep pushing this. I told him I was sure. He said he supported me and that he was proud of me for standing up for myself. That meant more than he knew. Growing up, I'd always tried to be the good son, the one who didn't cause problems, who did what was expected. Mom had taken advantage of that. She'd assumed I'd never find out, or that if I did find out, I'd forgive her quietly to keep the peace. She'd miscalculated. In mid-February, Mom's attorney accepted my counteroffer with one modification. $15,000 paid over 18 months. Not ideal, but realistic. My lawyer friend advised me to take it. He said going to court would cost time and money and might not result in much more. I agreed to the terms. The settlement was finalized in early March, exactly 1 year after Grandpa had given Mom the car money. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mom had to liquidate some investments to make the first payment. Dad called to tell me this bitterly, like I should feel guilty. I asked him if he'd be angry at a stranger who stole $35,000 from me. He said that was different. I asked how. He had no answer. Mom made her first payment of $5,000 in March. The money hit my account, and I stared at it for a long time. It felt hollow. The victory didn't feel like I'd thought it would. I wasn't happy or relieved. I was just tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being angry, tired of explaining to people why I was doing this. My girlfriend asked if I felt better now that the settlement was done. I told her honestly that I didn't know. She said maybe I needed closure beyond just the money. Maybe I needed to actually talk to Mom. I said maybe, but I wasn't ready yet. April came and Mom made her second payment. Dad texted me updates like he was keeping score, telling me how hard this was on Mom, how she'd had to pick up extra shifts at work, how stressed she was. Part of me felt bad. The larger part remembered that she'd created this situation entirely on her own. I used the settlement money to pay down my student loans aggressively. Watching that debt shrink felt better than I'd expected. This was what the money should have been used for all along. Education, transportation, building a life, not paying off mom's secret credit cards or leasing her a luxury car. In June, my brother reached out again. He said mom wanted to meet with me, just the two of us, to talk. No lawyers, no dad, just us. I asked what there was to talk about. He said mom wanted to apologize properly and explain herself. I told him she'd had plenty of chances to explain herself and had lied every time. He said people deserved second chances. I said people who steal $35,000 from their kids didn't deserve anything. But something in me was curious. Maybe I did need that closure my girlfriend mentioned. I agreed to meet mom at a coffee shop on neutral ground in July. She looked older when she walked in, tired in a way that made her seem fragile. We sat down and she immediately started crying, apologizing, saying she'd been wrong and selfish and scared. She explained the debt had been from a shopping addiction years ago that she'd hidden from everyone. She'd been ashamed and desperate, and when Grandpa gave her that money, she'd seen it as a lifeline for herself instead of help for me. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I told her I appreciated the apology, but it didn't change what she'd done. I asked if she understood why I'd pushed the lawsuit. She nodded and said she did now. She said she'd been angry at first, but had time to think about how her actions looked from my perspective. She said she'd been a bad mother and was sorry. I told her she hadn't been a bad mother in general, but she'd made terrible choices that hurt me deeply. I said trust was broken and would take years to rebuild if it ever could be. She asked if I'd ever forgive her. I said I didn't know. She accepted that. We talked for another hour about everything. She explained the full scope of her debt, how it had spiraled during a rough period in their marriage, how she'd hidden it out of shame and pride. She admitted the Mercedes had been a stupid purchase made in a moment of feeling like she deserved something nice after years of stress. She said she regretted it every day now. I asked about the college fund. She confirmed that most of it had gone to keeping the house during Dad's unemployment, which she'd also hidden from him at the time because she didn't want him to feel worse about being out of work. I told her that lying to protect people's feelings while stealing from them wasn't noble, it was just more lying. She agreed. By the end of our meeting, I didn't feel forgiveness exactly, but I felt understanding. Mom was flawed and had made terrible decisions, but she wasn't a monster. She was a person who'd gotten in over her head and made increasingly bad choices trying to fix problems she'd created. That didn't excuse anything, but it made it more comprehensible. Mom made her final payment in September, 3 months early. She'd apparently sold the Mercedes and downsized to a used sedan, using the extra money to finish paying me back. Dad texted me about it, noting that she'd sacrificed to make things right. I texted back acknowledging it and said it was a start. Grandpa invited me to Thanksgiving dinner. He said Mom would be there, and it was up to me if I wanted to come, but he'd love to see me either way. I thought about it for a long time. My girlfriend said whatever I decided, she'd support me. I decided to go. Thanksgiving was awkward but not hostile. Mom and I were polite to each other, distant but civil. We didn't hug when I arrived, and we didn't sit next to each other at dinner, but we also didn't fight. My brother seemed relieved. Dad looked tired but less angry. Grandpa seemed content that the family was at least in the same room again. During dinner, Mom stood up suddenly and said she wanted to say something. Everyone went quiet. She looked at me and apologized again publicly, in front of everyone, for what she'd done. She said I'd been right to hold her accountable and that she hoped eventually I could forgive her, but she understood if I couldn't. She said she was working on being a better person and a better mother, even if it was too late to fix everything. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Grandpa squeezed my shoulder. My girlfriend held my hand. We finished dinner, and it felt like maybe, possibly, there was a path forward that didn't involve lawyers and anger. It's been over a year since that Christmas dinner when everything exploded. Mom and I talk occasionally now, brief conversations about surface-level things. The trust isn't back and might never fully return, but we're not enemies anymore. I'm still processing everything, still working through the betrayal, still rebuilding my sense of what family means. The money helped me pay off my loans and finally buy a decent car, a practical sedan, nothing fancy. Every time I drive it, I think about what it cost beyond dollars. It cost my relationship with my mother, at least the version of that relationship I thought I had. It cost me my innocence about family and trust. It cost me the belief that parents always put their children first. But it also taught me to stand up for myself, to not let people take advantage of me even if they're family, to demand accountability. Those lessons were expensive, but maybe they were worth it. I still don't know if I made all the right choices, if I pushed too hard or should have pushed harder. I just know I did what felt necessary at the time, and I'd probably do it again.